Good afternoon, good evening, good morning. Welcome to another great What's in My Bag Live. Today, without further ado, I'm going to bring over Rachel Ross. Welcome, Rachel.
Thanks, Michaela. Thanks so much for having me. My main body is the Sony A1. This has been in my bag for, I think, 6 months or so now, and I'm absolutely in love with it. It's got all the features and functions that my previous Sony bodies have had, things that we'll talk about a little bit later, like bright monitoring and um, some of the ways that I set up my cameras for night photography. I do use this one for night photography, but it's not, I don't use it in all situations. I have a second body that I use for night photography, and that's my Sony A7S III. So I have two bodies and I switch back and forth depending on what kind of projects that I'm doing. And I'd be happy to share that with you if you have any questions about specifically when I use which camera. But the A1 is something that I turn to a lot during the day. It's because it's got this beautiful resolution. Um, I was in the Yukon recently and I took some photos, and of course, the first person that gets to see them is my mom. And she was looking at sort of the bottom half of one of my photos, and she said, "You should have just taken a picture of just that. I would love to have just that on my wall." So I actually just cropped in, and because the A1 has 50 megapixels, I can still create a beautiful print for her wall just by cropping into the photo. So the A1 is a beautiful camera, lots of resolution, and a real go-to. The Sony A7S III is only a 12 megapixel camera, but that makes it just an absolute monster for low light photography. And that makes it really fun to do some projects at night that I might not be able to well or as easily or with the kind of clarity and detail that I would like if I was using a higher resolution camera. So those are my two cameras. I have lots of fun lenses. The one that I use the most, the 12 to 24 GM f2.8. I live in an area where I have mountains, and the mountains are big subjects. And as you know, with a wide angle lens, you can get more in your frame. And that's just one of the fun things about a wide angle lens. The other really good part is, that lens distortion, being able to create unique compositions. But because I live in a part of the world where, the mountains are very imposing and they take up a lot of space, I still need more real estate in my photos so that I can get the stars in at the same time. So I do lean towards this super wide lens a lot for my night photography. This is not my very own lens. This one is one that I keep bugging Sony to borrow because I love it so much. Mine is on order though, so I have it coming to me. I've been able to use it a few times, and the quality of the stars using this lens is so sharp and so good. It's a beautiful lens as well, and at 14 millimeters, I get lots of that lens distortion. But because it's a prime, because it's so small, it's so good for night photography. It's good for hiking if I'm trying to keep the weight down in my pack. This is definitely a keeper in my bag. As soon as I get one of my very own, I promise I'll return this one. I use the 24 to 70 a lot. That one I use for night photography. I use it for day photography. I use it for stuff like this. And, it's lived in my bag for a very long time. It's not going anywhere. It's kind of a staple. You need that mid range lens. And I find that when I'm traveling to places like Scotland, and any kind of travel photography I do, or where the subjects are maybe not so imposing as the Rocky Mountains, then I'm typically reaching for my 24 to 70. This is a lens that when I'm at home, I will put this on my camera and I'll put it in the passenger seat beside me, throw a little seatbelt on it. And when I'm driving, um, and you get to watch the light change, or I see an animal on the side of the road or whatever, I have this one queued up and ready to shoot. So it's really good for those sort of long lens shots that you don't expect. Long lens photography is not something that you can typically plan for. So I like to just be prepared and have this one at the ready when I'm hiking and something happens. seeing some wildlife, hopefully not a bear, because my wide angle stuff is typically more planned out and more thought out. I scout compositions during the day, and then I go back and get them later when the light is good or when the conditions align at night. Whereas long lens photography is more opportunistic. And so this one just sort of travels around with me on my camera when I'm driving or hiking. And when the opportunity presents itself, then I get to get some amazing shots because I'm ready. Winter's coming, and I'm in Alaska right now. So these are my favorite gloves. If you've been with me for a while and you've been following me for a while, you know I've been using these things for years. They're made by the Heat Company. They have lots of different features to keep you warm. I'll give you a little demonstration. So first of all, they have like leather, which helps to protect your hands from the wind. Then I can pop my fingers out, and you can either buy the liners separately or you can buy the gloves that have the liners built in. I have both. I like them both. They have touchscreen fingertips, so I can work my phone. Importantly, though, when I have just the liner glove exposed, I can feel my buttons. When I'm setting up custom buttons, I like to be able to feel where I am. So like I want to be able to find my buttons in the dark for the things that I use the most. And having the touch, the little liner on the inside, and being able to feel the buttons is really important. You can put chemical warmers in here. I actually stick them inside the glove here so I can curl my fingers around them. And sometimes, like if it's really cold, I will put them in the top and the bottom just so that I have something around my fingers all the time for warmth. And I've been out shooting at -50, and I have not lost any fingers. So yeah, they're the warmest things that I've ever tried. When people come and do workshops with me, and it's winter, and they visit me in the Rockies, these are basically not required equipment per se, but so strongly recommended you can't say no. And I have like, other versions. These ones are sort of a light one for fall. They're merino wool. I wore them in the Yukon when I was there for 3 weeks, and it was everything I needed. Focus stacking is just a method of making sure that that everything is in focus from the front of the frame to the back of the frame. And if you are shooting at wide open apertures, and you have something really close to your lens, like we do at night, then we definitely need to focus stack. So you can think about if you were a portrait photographer and you shoot wide open at f2.8 and your subject is fairly close to you, you're going to get bokeh in front of your subject and behind them. And that's wonderful if you're a portrait photographer. It is not so wonderful if you are trying to photograph the stars or trying to photograph a landscape and you're trying to get everything in focus. So at f2.8, it's such a shallow plane of focus that we need multiple focal points as we work through the frame to make sure everything's sharp from corner to corner. So we don't need to change the settings. We don't need to change the ISO, the aperture, or the shutter. We just need to take multiple focal points, and then we can use programs like Photoshop or Helicon Focus to stack those, and the program will just automatically stack them so that you get a single image out of that, and all of the focal range is covered so that it's sharp all the way through.
One of my very favorite accessories in my bag by far is the Sony Commander remote. It's my favorite because I can use it to focus stack, and I can do that at night even when I can't see what I'm doing. So let's imagine this is a nighttime scene, and I use my headlamp to find my first focal point in the foreground. I can take this shot using autofocus and then switch the camera into manual focus. And all I have to do is press the plus sign to move my focal point from the foreground to the background. And you can see every time I do that, that little focus scale on the bottom is moving towards infinity. There's infinity. So at this point, my mountain would be in focus and my stars would be in focus. So that's how I can focus stack at night without being able to see what I'm doing. And obviously it works really well during the day, and it just makes moving through your whole focus stack really quick and easy.
for those of us who struggle with visual impairment, being able to click through the different focal points like I showed in the video, and then you find infinity, you know that if you're taking photos of the stars at that point, that your stars are going to be in focus and your most distant object is going to be in focus. So it really helps for those who are struggling with their vision, or just don't trust what they're seeing on the screen because, you know, maybe you wear bifocals or something like that. It really takes the guesswork out of it. When I was hiking out to my planned location, which is this waterfall, I came across this spot, and I just on a hunch decided that I would set up the camera and leave this and just run it as a time lapse. I used all of the functions of my Sony camera to try to set it up so that I would start shooting later. So I used interval shooting, and I set the camera to start in 99 minutes because that would be after sunset. And then I set up the interval so that it would take a shot and then with a 1 second delay, take another shot. I set it up to take 2,000 shots, thinking that that would kind of get me through the majority of the night. And that's how many shots I had left on that memory card. And I used the remote commander to find infinity focus. So I know if you've done any kind of night shooting and you're trying to figure out how to set infinity during the daytime when you can't see a star to focus on, that's how I got around that. Is I just used that Sony remote commander and I found infinity focus. Then I used interval shooting to set it on a delay, and I had to guess at the settings. So I started by figuring out, how am I going to get minimal star trailing? You know, what's sort of that minimal star trailing point for me at that focal length? And I think it was 6 seconds, which can be long for aurora shooting. You know, if the aurora is really moving or really dancing, then I'm probably going to want to be shooting much shorter shutters, so 2 seconds. But I had to make a decision on that. When you're in the north, you like the aurora it's like pretty much every night. So even if it's sort of low level activity, it'll be something. So I kind of guessed a little bit in my settings. So it was a 6 second exposure to get the aurora, the stars sharp without much trailing. 4,000 ISO. I know that that's an ISO that's really clean on the Sony a7S III. I can shoot at 4,000, and you really don't see a lot of noise, especially in the time lapse with everything moving. So yeah, I just set it all up ahead of time, walked away. I thought it rained on that camera. It actually did rain, but I had a rain sleeve on it, so the camera was protected. There is a couple points in the very start of the time lapse. If you look carefully, you can see a raindrop had kind of exploded on the lens and dripped down. When you shoot with a wide angle lens like the 12, I've got a lot of scene to work with. And so in post, what I'm able to do is create a 4:5 version and then use like a Ken Burns effect to move through the, Japan across the shot. And so then you get that you get all the motion of the time lapse, but you get also the slide motion. And it's because I'm shooting so wide. The custom button that I have bright monitoring assigned to is my C2.
I want to show you one of my very favorite features for night shooting of the Sony camera. Right now you're looking at the back of my Sony a7S III with the 12-24 f2.8, and I've arrived out here in the middle of the night. I really can't see what I'm doing even when my shutter and aperture and ISO are pushed wide open. So one of the beautiful things about a Sony camera is a function called bright monitoring, and when I turn that on, it essentially allows me to see in the dark. The camera boosts the gain internally, and I can now see the outline of my mountain. I can see that I have some aurora off to the right of the mountain, and I can even see the outline of the shoreline, which is my foreground.
Bright monitoring has really changed the way that I can photograph anything at night. That little video clip, I just shot that a couple of days ago here in Alaska, and the aurora never got crazy, but we drove around for hours and hours and hours, and by we, it was me and Mary Beth Kaczynski. She's a rock star. You have to check out her night work as well. And so we arrived at this location that I hadn't been to at all, and in the middle of the night, and I'm stumbling around out there on the rocks, and I was feeling tired and clumsy and having a difficult time just keeping myself from dropping the camera and whatever. Yeah, so bright monitoring really takes a lot of stress away when you can arrive somewhere in the middle of the night in the dark and you can find your composition really quickly and easily. It really changes how you shoot. And then you can follow that up with, once you have that, I can do a focus stacked foreground right away, because all I have to do is shine a light on my foreground and use my Sony Commander remote, and I can grab the foreground and then just sit there and let the camera photograph the sky in time lapse mode. So that's pretty much what I did the other night.
Thank you for being here and for doing this. And I'm sure we'll see you again soon at a Sony event.
I'm sure I would love to be back. So anytime.
Our thanks for you tuning in today as well. Just a couple of things to leave you with. You can find the replay of the What's in My Bag Live, both today's and last week's and upcoming ones, on alphauniverse.com, so you can head over there. You can register for the next one. We have one coming up next week with Miguel Quiles. You can also obviously follow Rachel if you don't yet. She is wonderful. She has some really cool stuff that she shares on Instagram, and we have some cool stuff that we share on our Instagram, so make sure you follow us as well. We have Alpha Female workshops every month, so keep an eye out on that page on Alpha Universe to see what's coming up and learn more. And as always, we're sharing content on our YouTube channel all the time. That's probably where you're watching it, so make sure to subscribe so you can get notified about future What's in My Bag lives. Thank you again, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.